Hello, everybody. Going live a few moments early. I can see Tim waiting there backstage. We have got, major developments again today. Just when you think you're going to get a day off, this lot, they never give you a day off. So just to summarize what has happened, Prince Harry, about 15 minutes ago, announced that he is going to Toronto on Wednesday and Thursday to do engagements for Remembrance Day, military engagements with military organizations and those kinds of organizations that, of course, very dear to his heart. He has a perfect right to do so. He is a former serving member of the military. But the timing is extraordinary. I'm going to bring Tim in, and then we're going to talk a little more about the timing, because William has just touched down in Brazil for the Earthshot Prize. Tim, hello. How are you?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm okay. I mean, I'm kind of in shock that I do think it's a very provocative move. So, just to recap exactly what happened, just about half an hour ago, we received information from Harry's office that he was going to do a series of events on Tuesday, on Wednesday and Thursday this week. This is the biggest week of the year for his brother, the Prince of Wales, with the Earthshot Prize in Brazil. William has literally just landed in Brazil, and it seemed very provocative. His team saying that it's not provocative at all. It's just that they can't announce things till the last minute because of security and that kind of thing. But this looks like you were saying, Tim, this looks like people on maneuvers, right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I will just say that after the last royal news cycle of the last 3 weeks, this is very much a return to kind of petty business as normal. I mean, it's kind of interesting that these two brothers are still at it in this sort of sense. And it really reminds me, as some of you might know or might not know, I'm a theatre critic in another part of my professional life. And there's a very big show here on Broadway. Broadway is that way, outside my flat, a few miles away. No, a mile away. And there's a show called Death Becomes Her, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful in a sense, as I said in my review, it's the most fun you'll have on Broadway. If you're coming to New York for any reason, and if you want a night of pure ridiculous escapism, can't imagine why, it's the show to see. And it focuses on two warring divas who are not willing to cede the stage to the other and resort to ever more, as you might remember, it was a film in the early 90s that starred Goldie Hawn.
Right.
And, they resort to ever more wild antics to undermine the other and to retain the spotlight on themselves. What does that remind you of? And it just really strikes me. I mean, I can only say that this will be music to the ears of the royal spinners who have been desperately trying to get the spotlight off Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as we must try to call him these days, and his continuing sagas with the other cops going to be called in, are the authorities going to be called in, the ongoing Virginia Giuffre situation, clearly taking the temperature of Britain over the weekend, Tom. I'm sorry if I'm misjudging it, but from over this side of the Atlantic, it seems no one is satisfied with what the palace have lately come up with for Andrew and his Sandringham exile as being an at all adequate or lasting response to that particular saga. So I would imagine, at least on this Monday morning, American time, Monday afternoon, British time, but there may be some light relief in the return of an old storyline of these two brothers kind of out pettying one another. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm going to correct you slightly. I think that people do feel that enough has been done to Andrew, actually, but that's just my and my feeling is that domestically people feel enough has been done. Internationally, I think there's why the hell isn't this guy being prosecuted by the police? But I think people in the UK understand that a police prosecution is never, ever going to happen, that the Royals are never going to allow this to end up in court.
Oh, that's super interesting. I think you're
don't
right.
want to get distracted by that, because what I think is so amazing about this story today, right? So literally all weekend, people have been messaging me again. What does the Andrew thing mean for Harry and Meghan? Does it mean, that they're going to lose their titles? And
okay.
and of course, like ultimately it does mean that they're going to. I've been reporting for ages that William is going to take their titles off them, and the people who've been pushing back at me from the palace have always been saying there's no mechanism to take away people's titles. It can't be done. Look at Andrew. We can't take. Well, now, as of 7 p.m. on Thursday evening, suddenly it is possible to take away people's titles. So the question becomes, do we take away their titles or not? Do we want them to keep them or not? That's a real moment of peril for Harry and Meghan. So their camp has very much been pushing back. There's a story in the Sun today saying they completely support the king on his actions that he's done against Andrew, that they think the king's played an absolute blinder. There's, their friends have been telling me that Harry is in contact with the king, regular contact. I've been told today, Harry's in regular contact with the king on the phone. They're having private discussions, very much a sense that everything's building and getting better. And then out of the blue, this, and off it goes again. This is William's biggest thing. And do you know what, Tim? They've done this before. Harry and Meghan, what's really fascinating, they've done this before. Do you remember a couple of years ago, they were coming to New York?
I do.
And the whole Susan Hussey thing blew up while they were on the plane. And that was the Earthshot thing. And then I think that Harry and Meghan then did some other, big event. I can't remember the exact frustration. I can't remember the exact details, but this is such an important thing to William. It's almost like a grudge thing that Harry sets out to ruin it every year. I mean, we should not be talking about the war between the brothers today. We should be talking about the train getting back on the track, about the Royals united. William apparently sent his speech to Charles to read before he went out. That's what we should be talking about, right, Tim? And in fact, God, we're back to the civil war between the brothers. I mean, I had to look up the pictures of them at Diana's funeral when they're standing back to back,
Well, I mean, okay, so I'm going to be Mr. Editor, I suppose, and say who is we for a start, because I think when it comes to the royal news gravy train, I think many stories can coexist at once. And to your earlier point, at least here in America, maybe because the Jeffrey Epstein saga is still very current here in Congress and the rowing over the list of names, and of course Donald Trump's intervention over the weekend with his thoughts on the situation at the palace. I think it is. I think there are so many unanswered questions on many people's minds when it comes to that. I think it was a strong move by the palace, clearly, to draw a line under things on Thursday. But I think questions remain, and those questions have been fully. I was reading the British Sunday newspapers. Those questions around Andrew, legal jeopardy, and the authorities are still very current. That doesn't mean that I agree with you. I mean, it's interesting to see, an old storyline, the enmity between William and Harry, return again. And I absolutely agree with you that the upstaging storyline is one for the ages. But Tom, we have to tell our watchers and our listeners who was the original practitioner of the best and most dramatic royal upstaging moment in modern times. And that was, unsurprisingly, the boy's mother, Princess Diana, who, on the evening, if my memory serves me right, of Charles revealing all to the British nation on television, in his Jonathan Dimbleby interview, about his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles and talking about that and his marriage, Diana that night wore a Christina Stambolian knockout black cocktail dress, went to the Serpentine in London and blew apart her husband's desired front pages the next day and put herself there. The message, that dress became known as the revenge dress. Mm-hmm. Revenge dresses have been a feature of fashion ever since. And so actually, their mother was the arch and prime practitioner of the front page steal at a key moment. And maybe Harry is taking a leaf out of his mother's book in that respect.
I know, gosh, it's such a shame. Unfortunately, we're at such short notice. We don't have our producer Ben here. Otherwise, he would be producing these pictures for us in real time. But I don't think I trust my skills enough to do that. But
Tom,
you're right.
How does William feel about it? Oh, sorry, you carry on. Sorry, Tom, I
Yeah,
interrupted.
I think you're absolutely right. This seems to be something in the Windsor DNA, doesn't it? They conduct their personal family quarrels through the pages of the newspaper, and it's, you look, I'm not going to complain. I'm a journalist, so I'm not going to complain about it. But I can't help feeling that it's quite unedifying. And also, it seems to me that this is one that Harry's really going to lose, because William has got the Earthshot Prize. Kylie Minogue is coming on stage. Keir Starmer's there. It's proper like world power. Do you know what I mean? It's like Harry's like at a charity dinner for a sort of charity that is called the Charity True Patriot Love Foundation. I'm sure they do magnificent work, but I've never heard of them before.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, like, it's a really hard thing to go up against the King of England, and it's a really hard thing to go up against the heir to the King of England. I mean, if you like they say, if you take a shot at the king, you want to kill him. And I just feel that, like, for Harry, this it's just being seen. I think it's being already immediately the reaction online, the reaction that I'm seeing is people are seeing it as opportunistic and a little bit kind of, I don't know, just very kind of, opportunistic. And, he risks, I think he risks to people both, outside of this, not to be the insiders will obviously all think, but to the general public, I think he really risks appearing motivated by resentment. And that is not a good look. Like, we've been through that. We've been through resentment. We've been through grievance, haven't we? I thought we were meant to be on the other side of that.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, haven't we? I mean, maybe not on this broadcast because we've been so Andrew focused these last few weeks, but Tom and I certainly, as the Harry and William storyline played out, when Tom and I worked day in, day out together at the Daily Beast, we would discuss the dynamics of this particular storyline. And as Tom says, I think, I mean, in Harry's memoir Spare, that was the zenith of it, really. There was a grievance and resentment storyline that Harry, I think, expressed extremely eloquently and powerfully in that book. Whether you like Harry or not like Harry, whatever your point of view about it, those pages set it absolutely down in stone. And as the years went on, Tom mapped in his brilliant articles how Meghan seemed to be going off in another direction. Oh, thanks, Tom. There it is. There is the Princess Diana, Christina Stambolian revenge dress the night that she knocked her husband off the front pages. And that is a classic bit of Image's power, basically. So as I was saying, Harry and Meghan seem to be going in a sort of, although Harry has ongoing court cases, as Tom has spoken about and written about, in Britain around his security and around his various actions against newspapers and what they've written about him and Meghan. It seemed that the couple were moving in a kind of more, for want of a better word, positive in inverted commas direction, i.e. with new media projects or smiling a bit more, seeming to be a bit more amenable, a sort of post-beef era. And I think what you're absolutely spot on about, Tom, this morning is that this feels, whatever else this is, this kind of diary clash out of nowhere, deliberately, strategically diary clashing, it would seem to be a kind of effort, it would seem to be a return to the kind of jabby brother kind of pettiness that we thought, if not had passed, was being felt in private rather than played out in public. I think that's the key. And it's interesting to see it return to the kind of public stage. And Tom, to your point about what's it all for, because like you say, if William's got the literal star power of prime ministers and celebrities over in his thing on Wednesday night, and Harry's dinner while valuable, and I think focused on veterans, which is something very dear to him, obviously, and very important for the rest of us, and should be valued by all of us. It seems to be a sort of lower profile thing. I would just say that if Harry's intention is in any way a PR intention, sometimes PR and PR battles can be gestural. Sometimes the front page isn't the only object. Sometimes it's just to show up, and sometimes it's just to put your stake in the ground. So whatever Harry is planning on Wednesday night, whether he really feels he can dislodge his brother in terms of media attention this week, at least by doing it, he's putting his stake in the ground. And maybe in terms of what he wants, in PR terms, I'm not decrying how important he sees the issue that he's attending on Wednesday night. That is something separate. I'm purely talking about this as PR strategy. It says, I'm here, I'm doing stuff, and yep, that night my brother's doing something big, and I'm going to be out on the playing field too. So bring it on. It's a kind of bring it on kind of thing.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think I'm going to just add another picture here for us to remember. This, of course, the famous picture of the brothers at war. This was taken when they unveiled the Diana Memorial. Actually, fairly near the beginning of the argument, before things had soured as much as they have now, and certainly before they had soured publicly as much as they have now. But there is no doubt that relations between these two men are now absolutely, they're at absolute zero. So
really?
very interesting. And I think you're right, Tim. I think, and as you said, when we talked about Meghan being in Paris, it's very clear it's a couple who are on maneuvers. They're not prepared to sit at home in their lovely house in California. They want to be out. They want to be part of the conversation. They want to be seen, and they want to be on the scene. And that is all fair enough. That's their right. What I think is very, very interesting about this is I think that Harry perceives correctly that there is a vulnerability around Remembrance Day for the royal family, because the reality is that the only two people who have seen active service who are living members of the royal family are Prince Harry and Prince Andrew. Now, I'm sure Prince Harry doesn't want to be categorized along with Prince Andrew, but the fact is that Harry has seen active military service, and therefore I think anybody would agree that he's entitled to mark and honor his friends who've been killed in battle on Remembrance Day. William may certainly has an official role in it, but it's different if your friends have been killed, if people you worked and served alongside shoulder to shoulder with have been killed, have been injured, have been. And I think that Harry actually perceives the vulnerability of the royal family here. I think that the royal family have been very unwise to try and exclude Harry from any form of involvement in Remembrance Day. I don't see if Charles is so keen on being seen as the great convener and the great healer, I don't see what harm a wreath from Harry would do. I don't think it would do any harm at all. In fact, I think it would make everybody look good and remind us all that there are more important things in this world than whatever the royal family choose to be arguing about on any given day. And I think that this is an issue that is not going to go away. And the problem for the royals is that Remembrance Day is the most important day of the year for them. I mean, arguably, you could say that the Christmas Day photograph and the Trooping of the Colour photograph, Trooping of the Colour photograph definitely used to be more iconic because there were so many people there. I mean, now it's not such an interesting photograph, frankly, because it's just like 5 people. Christmas Day is obviously a big thing. But Remembrance Day has this unique importance for the royal family because they are the head of the military. And of course, a huge reason why a lot of people say it's very important to keep a military is because the military are therefore pledging allegiance to a non-political figure. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think that in America, right, Donald Trump, I assume, is the commander-in-chief of the army.
Yeah,
I would think. Well, that's fine, and that's how they want to set things up in America, that's the president's role. And the president, of course, always filled a kind of king-shaped hole in the American Constitution.
Yeah.
But the military ultimately is the font of the authority of the royal family. The royal family, that I often say, is structured along military lines. It's a sort of quasi-military organization. And so they are very keen to own every single aspect and every single angle of Remembrance Sunday. And I, for one, thought that if Harry was really serious about making peace with his father, I thought that if he did a Remembrance Day thing, it would be the following, what they call Remembrance Tide, officially ends on November the 11th, which was the day this year. I think it changes from year to year, but or maybe it doesn't. Maybe that is always the final day of it. But I thought that he would do it then, so it didn't clash with Remembrance Sunday. I think it's unwise of Harry, because I think he's picked a fight that he can only lose, and I think it's back for me. It's taking me back to the narrative of grievance, of I'm, blah blah blah. That's what it feels like to me. It feels petty, and for God's sake, like, William is like, you may not agree, you may not think Earthshot's the greatest thing. Earthshot, I'm sure, is a big PR thing, but he is trying to mobilize like people to like give a damn about the environment. I mean, like, it seems a weird thing to pull focus from.
I mean, if you think about it from, for a start, that was wonderfully eloquent, and we should, and a lovely analysis, actually. You made me think about a whole group of things, which is the presence of the royals. You're right, in terms of photographic and physical presence, Tom. The royals on Remembrance Sunday, which I think this year falls on the 9th, i.e. this coming Sunday, in Britain. I'm guessing it wouldn't be the 16th, would it?
Yeah, and I can tell you, because I'm doing a live with Plum Sykes on the night to comment on the aesthetic,
fashion,
the whole thing. Yeah.
It's big overcoats and a lot of black that day. Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing day, and it's a very charged and moving. It's consistently, from even when Tom and I were both much younger, it's a consistently moving, in a day freighted with significance, essentially. And it's Britain at its most ceremonial, and the royals are obviously center stage, as Tom said, because they're leading the military. I would just say that in terms of what is going on this week with these two brothers, and with Harry, if you really think about it, and I'm taking an entirely cynical PR point of view on it, it's going to increase interest in both events. And with a rumbling family storyline, I don't think actually ultimately, I don't think the fact that these two boys are doing two different things that day is going to take the cameras away from William. And I don't think it's going to take whatever cameras were going to be around Harry away from Harry. And I do think the Invictus Games, which is obviously something, again, that Tom has written much about, which was Harry's idea, his great passion, and for veterans who've suffered various degrees of injury playing sport. Veterans, and as Tom said earlier, their experiences, their endurance, their commitment, and their dedication to their countries in serving their countries is something that Harry holds very dear, and it's extremely personal. And whatever one thinks of Prince Harry, that dedication has been borne out in practical, emotional, administrative terms in what he does. And so, sure, the timing is deliberate, not ideal, choose your adjective, but his commitment cannot be doubted. And I think on Wednesday, whatever does happen, you'll see the cameras being at whatever event they'll be. And actually, with the underlying storyline of these two brothers still being in enmity, in conflict with each other, oddly, it may even enhance coverage of both, because that storyline is given fresh life by the positioning of both those events. And it does, again, whatever else you think, Harry owning his portion of Remembrance Day cake, because he obviously won't be at the London ceremony, one would think, even however much he would like to be. And I think however much it would be brilliant if the royals could find a way to include him, because it is his passion, it is his dedication. He did see active service, and I think it would enhance both Royals and Harry if there was some way to allow him to be there. But as he can't be, having the Royals spread out across Remembrance Week with Harry doing his own events in California, wherever this event he's doing is.
Toronto.
Say again, Tom?
Toronto.
Thanks, Tom.
Canada.
In Toronto. Like, is only for the good, because it does remind us of their presence in what is essentially a very solemn week. And as time goes on, and as generations age, and as service people die, and more service people from the Second World War are no longer with us, it behoves upon all of us that Remembrance Day remains as current as possible. And having Harry as a much younger person with a link to active service and a link to the principles of Remembrance Day can only be a good thing.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And I agree, that Harry has a right, indeed a responsibility, many would say, to mark Remembrance Day. But I wonder whether the announcement of it could have been made on a day other than the day William arrived in Rio. Like it is interesting, because when I asked them why today, they said, well, he doesn't have international protected person status anymore. Therefore, we are forced to announce things at the very last minute. And this was the advice of the security professionals that we hire, which I thought was a very, actually, quite an elegant way of saying what could have been said more sharply, which is, you kicked us out and you wouldn't let us have the role in the royal family that we wanted, which we wanted half in, half out. We wanted to be doing this stuff officially on your behalf. We have not been allowed to do it officially on your behalf, but we insist on our right to do it unofficially all the same. And so I thought in one sense it was quite elegant, but I'm afraid that I'm afraid that unfortunately I think that this is going to look a bit petty from Harry, and I think that is because William's already there, and it's the timing is not great, and it is a bit petty. But at the end of the day, as you say, let's just hope it brings all the more attention to the very important commemoration of Remembrance Day, the end of the First World War, and indeed all people who served. Remembrance Day is not just about the end of the First World War; it's about all people who served in all wars and have been wounded or injured or killed, and to remember those people. So,
Tom, can I ask something? Like, you mentioned at the top of our chat that things with Charles and Harry are faltering, but seem to be on some kind of course, if not of reconciliation, then some kind of communication has been established. Harry still talked in previous broadcasts about Harry still looking with great suspicion around the activities of the men in grey around Charles, as he calls them, his aides and his assistants, in some way either obstructing or sabotaging their relationship. But that relationship seems to be on a course of some kind we haven't discussed, and seeing as it's the central story behind the news story today of Harry announcing this event that's going to clash with Williams, what is the current state of play between the brothers? Is it still sub-zero? Are there any green shoots, or is it still just completely Antarctica, basically?
Yeah, completely Antarctica. The brothers are not speaking, are not communicating either directly or indirectly, even via their offices. They are not communicating in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. Communication with the king is much better. There are apparently, I am told, regular phone calls. There was indeed cooperation with the king's office. That the king's office was forewarned about this event this week. So that in itself is quite interesting. I think that the offices are communicating. And of course, there were photographs earlier this year that showed Harry's people meeting with the king's people at a club in London. Mysteriously, a photographer happens to be waiting in the bushes, but who knows how these things happen? Because if it's not photographed, did it really happen? I think the concern that William has is that he cleaves, I suppose, to what I think he cleaves quite fairly to a view that people want their kings to be decisive, to embody authority, to not hesitate, to be ruthless when necessary in the service of stability. And I think that the William, ultimately, the biggest conflict between William and Charles, and they have not had the best relationship, and there's a lot of spin saying that you couldn't fit a cigarette paper between them and all of this kind of stuff. And you know, fair enough, I'm sure there's lots of stuff they agree on, but the relationship between the two is not good. I was told earlier this year that the king doesn't speak to both of his sons, was how it was put to me. And the relationship is not good, and it has been very tested by the whole Andrew situation. It was particularly tested by Charles ordering William and Kate to drive Andrew to church in the summer of 2023, I think, at Balmoral. Because it was effectively an attempt by the king, who was engaged in this ill-advised effort to rehabilitate Andrew, to effectively use William and Kate's political capital to say, oh yeah, William and Kate are down with this project as well. You know, they have them in the car. That went down very badly and made things worse. And as you know, what one of William's friends said to me was, you know, William was right about Andrew and he's right about Harry. He thinks it's a big mistake letting Harry back in after the allegations of racism that were made against Charles and Kate in Omid Scobie's book that was published in a foreign language and then denied, and it was all rather complicated. But I think that fundamentally, William feels that his father is weak and is, you know, I think it's very difficult, and I think that Charles, frankly, doesn't have a great deal of support in the United Kingdom about, you know, rehabilitating Harry and letting Harry come back and all of this kind of stuff. But I think that also, I think in a way, people don't quite have the affection for Charles that they had for the Queen, for the late Queen Elizabeth. And I think you can see a world that people maybe just sort of slightly understood the Queen walking into her memorial with Andrew on her arm in a way that I don't think they actually do quite give the same indulgence to Charles having Harry round for tea and chocolate cake. And I think that ultimately this is going to end up with Harry bringing his children back to meet Charles. And I think that is going to be a difficult moment for Charles to navigate, because British people took it very personally when they went on television and said that, you know, it was prejudiced and it was racist and there was bias and these kinds of things. They took it very personally and they did not like it. And Harry remains incredibly unpopular in the United Kingdom. And there is not a groundswell of opinion that believes that he should be rehabilitated. I think there is a groundswell of opinion that thinks that a person in Charles's health conditions is, you know, should be allowed to, you know, see their grandchildren. But I think that the two conflict, like the people hold these contrary ideas at the same time.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Tom. I would have thought that would the picture ever be taken, that there would be such, given the state of Charles's health, what he's been through, and the fact he hasn't seen Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet for such a long period of time. In fact, has he ever seen Lilibet?
I think he's seen Lilibet once at the Queen's Jubilee. They both, do you remember they all came over? One very brief thing, wasn't it?
I think the sense of a family, the sense of any family being reunited after a period of estrangement, whatever that would be, and particularly a sick grandparent seeing their grandchildren after such a long period of time of not being able to see them, I think that would be moving for many people, whether they like the royals or not. I did want to, when it comes to brothers, which is, I guess, the subject of our news story today. Okay, so it's Antarctica, it's sub-zero. Okay, I get that. On the part of the brothers, is there one of those brothers that would like a reconciliation and one not? Or are they both in exactly the same position of not wanting anything? Or would one of them want something? And is there any future road, impossible to say I know, But is there any future road back? If so, I always wondered if Harry would be a bit more kind of, let's try and do this, rather than William, who seems, at least the public image of William seems to be kind of rod of iron on this type of thing. But is there, or are they both in the same no way thanks position, these two?
Great question, Tim. Harry has made it very clear that he would like to reconcile with his entire family, including his brother. William has made it very clear that if an apology came from Harry, he would consider it.
Okay.
So they are a long, long way apart from this. Harry is not in any way anywhere close to giving an apology. I don't think he ever will be. After he was in the UK earlier this year, he made a trip to Ukraine with a reporter from The Guardian and basically told him, "Je ne regrette rien." He said, I have no regrets about what I wrote in the book. It was all completely justified. It was completely fair. Friends of Harry's telling me afterwards, yeah, he doesn't regret it. And he's, whatever else you might think of Harry, he speaks what he believes, and he says, he blurts out what he believes, and he says what he believes. And he believes that he and his wife were treated appallingly by the family. He believes that the briefing against them by other members of the family contributed to their paranoia, the mental illness, and suicidal ideation. By Meghan, and he believes that that is what killed his mother, and he wants to keep his family safe, and etc., etc. Like, these arguments are well rehearsed, but the really interesting thing is that it looks like Harry has found a way back into his father's good graces, albeit limited good graces. But William, no, it's not going to happen. I predict that William and Harry will see each other one more time in their lives, which will be at their father's funeral. I do not think that Harry will be invited to the coronation. I think it would just be so hypocritical of William to invite Harry to the coronation. I can't quite see it. And, by all accounts, Harry is not going to apologize. He feels he has nothing to apologize for. If anything, Harry's always said, that they should apologize. I mean, he has dropped that demand recently. But it's very sad. And I think anyone who's, fallen out with anyone, a friend or a brother or whatever, it's always horrible when you fall out with people. But I think it's particularly horrible in this case because, they were just so close. They were so close as kids. And they were so kind of abandoned really by fate, by their mother, obviously, who was taken from them, and their father, who was just so busy trying to get his own life in order after everything happened, and was very distant and very focused on his work. And they were very, very close to each other, and they were great friends. And it's very sad.
I think you're just extremely right. And I think, again, what everyone thinks of the royals and whether you think this is all just, privileged nonsense, I think it does key into people's emotions, this particular relationship and the state it's in, because first of people's familial circumstances and identifying with whatever element of what's going on in their own families. We've discussed this before. Regardless of their riches and privileges, the royal family, the F word in that title, symbolically does seem to strike something with people, and in some way they can map experiences, if not material experiences, more emotional experiences, onto that family. And then there's also something kind of biblical, almost classical literature about two brothers being estranged, essentially. It's one of the oldest narrative, Cain and Abel, it's one of the oldest sort of classical models of storytelling and classical conflicts in storytelling, brothers, essentially, but their closeness and then their estrangement. And as you say, Tom, I think for a generation that did know Diana and grew up, remembers the tragedy of her death, they will remember. And there's the lovely picture of them was it Fort Park when they were? They will remember them walking behind her coffin, and on the day of her funeral, and Harry just looking so young, and William looking older and just looking down, and them both. And what I remember from that day and that broadcast is people's cries from the crowd, which disembodied and very emotional, but aimed at the boys, either saying something by name to them, and then, of course, the envelope, the card, I should say, on top of Diana's coffin amidst the flowers that said "Mummy," which I think people also remember from that day. And so I think when people consider this and consider where they've reached these two, I think that's what focuses attention, because the public remembers those images and the power and the impact of those images and the closeness that they clearly had at that moment. And of course, regardless of what Harry wrote in Spare, and regardless of what has been said and written since about things that have happened in their adult years, and a lot of water goes under a lot of bridges in those in that time, I think people hope that, and maybe brackets against hope, that there is some kind of way back. Tom, I suppose another question is then, regardless of where the two brothers are, is Charles's dearest wish that there is a reconciliation between them, or as an adult and as a monarch and as someone who we saw last week with his own brother can act ruthlessly, for want of a better word, when needs to be, how clear-sighted / is Charles clear-sighted, thinking these two are never going to make it up and I'm resigned to that? Or as a dad, regardless of all that, is it a dearest motivating wish of his that they do reconcile? Where does, I guess, King Charles stand on this whole thing?
Yeah, another great question, Tim. I think it's sometimes forgotten that this has been going on for a long while, right? That the fallout between the boys predates the leaving of the royal family. Now, of course, when you say it like that, it seems really obvious. But remember the interview with Tom Bradby on ITV, where Harry said they were going in different directions. That was when they were still part of the royal family, right? That was on this official tour of Africa. And of course, we know that Charles wants the boys to reconcile, and that Charles feels both of the boys are being pig-headed because of Harry's account of it in his book, where in the prologue, he describes waiting in the graveyard at Frogmore House to meet Charles and William. And Charles says to the two of them, "Please do not make my final years a misery." And I think it's very important to understand that that comment is directed at both of them. It is, and undoubtedly, we can see there is a difference of opinion. Charles, through his actions, has made it, which the favorite way of the royals to communicate is through actions speak louder than words. Charles has made it very clear that he believes that the way forward is forgiveness and rehabilitation, and let's all meet and have a cup of tea and a slice of cake.
Yeah.
William has made it very clear that he is sticking to the old ideas that legitimacy requires control, that control requires strength, that when a king becomes in hoc to their private emotion, they're no longer sovereign. It teeters, and they become the whole thing comes crumbling down. So I think there's this relationship now. I think that Charles actually, I wasn't sure about it at the time, but I do actually think that Charles probably strategically did do the right thing to have Harry for a cup of tea and a slice of cake. And if, they want to have the occasional phone call, so be it. Because I think that the ongoing negative relationship between Harry and William does have the potential to poison William's reign, actually. If this keeps happening for the next 30 years, that every time William tries to do something, Harry does something. Every time William tries to do something, Archie does something, or Lilibet does something. It's a problem. I want to make it clear. I think that Harry, I do not think that it's the right thing to go on television or books and accuse your family of being racist or of making these allegations against your family. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And I don't accept that he was backed into a corner. He had to say, I think he did it for the money. And I think it was the wrong thing to do. And I think that William has every right to be angry and never want to speak to him again. But I think in William's position as the monarch, I think he needs to actually look a little bit at his father and think, well, actually, in the long run, do I look like the bigger person if I just say, all right, fine, come and have a cup of tea?
Mm-hmm. You know what? I think you're right, but I also think, I mean, you know better. You have so many more sources and stuff, but I do think that Harry wrote and said all that he said in Spare, the memoir, and in those interviews, because he simply felt unheard, and he simply felt that all his objections over his treatment, his perceived treatment, his and Meghan's treatment, everything else, all the official channels, all the channels and the familial channels of redress had not been acted upon, and therefore scorched earth time. Tom, do you okay, I'm going to ask this for people who might be watching and listening who are wondering the same thing, seeing as we're sort of future casting slightly. Is there, in any way, shape or form, a dream scenario post whenever Charles leaves the throne, departs the throne in those circumstances, where the brothers not only reconcile, but Harry and Meghan returns to the royal family, and a new, hip, trendy, hot royal age of reconciled brothers, young, attractive families going forward sort of take seed? Or is that so out of the realms of possibility as to almost be nonsensical? Could it happen? Because that obviously, in terms of what the Queen wanted, in terms of a bedrock future generation, happy relations restored, everyone back on track, that would surely be the dream royal situation in future casting terms, wouldn't it? But how realizable, how realistic is that?
I think it would be amazing. And actually, when Harry was back in the UK before he blew it all up again, actually people were pleased to see him, and he injected some much needed glamour and a bit of a laugh and a bit of fun into the whole royal engagement, which can be a little bit dry, shall we put it. Well, look, William and Kate are pretty boring. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think they've made a pretty good brand, actually, out of being boring. I think it's quite deliberate that they've set out to be quite boring and middle class and dull, and and they've done it very successfully. In one respect, would it be amazing if Harry came back? Yes, it would. What are the circumstances under which it could happen? Well, one of two things would need to happen. Either Harry would have to apologize, or William would have to shelve his demand for an apology. So one of those two things has to happen. And I'm afraid, as things stand right now, neither of those things are going to happen.
This week, Tom, let's get back to the news event of the week, which is why we're talking. We haven't said how William would feel about it. Now, I know in previous reporting that you've done and that we've discussed, am I right in thinking that, at least allegedly, as being told by sources to you and other journalists, from being infuriated consistently by Harry's maneuvers and movements, we were being told, as time went on, that William really just was parking Harry and whatever Harry was getting up to mischief-making wise over here, and was not even giving it credence and would not be bothered by it, and was forging ahead with his own thing. So, whilst the media is getting steamed up about the diary clash coming on Wednesday between the two brothers' events, how can you give us any insight into how William currently might perceive such a thing, if at all? Is it parked over here, or would he be actively irritated, or both, or whatever?
So what they've always said in the past when these things have happened is they've said, we're not going to be distracted. And that is the line. They haven't said anything yet, but I think they might even be beyond we're not going to be distracted to just we're not being distracted, if you know what I mean. I'd be surprised if they say anything at all. So yeah, just to recap for people, so what's basically happened is
Good
that
idea.
Harry has announced today, just as William was touching down in Brazil for the Earthshot Prize, that he was going to do a couple of fairly high-profile events in Toronto around Remembrance Day with veterans. And obviously, people are saying that we're back to the bad old days of Harry trying to overshadow William and competition and the war, the civil war between the brothers exploding again. I think that one thing that I would say, Tim, that is different is that I am assured that Harry's team told the king what was going on.
Which is important. That's important.
It's very important.
Yeah.
And presumably the king shared it with William, and William shrugged his shoulders and said, well, what the hell anyway, we have to carry on. I've got Kylie Minogue and Keir. I don't care.
I mean, that's, to be honest, I mean, the palace would often say how, well, again, I'm paraphrasing, and Tom will correct me if I'm wrong, but the palace would often infer, oh, Harry's being juvenile, this in previous times. And so if Harry literally does the grown-up adult thing and says, I'm doing this event, I'm letting you know about it, surely that's a grown-up, mature thing to do and a kind of right and proper thing to do. And why not take it at face value of someone just saying, sorry, guys, there is this thing, I'm doing it, I wanted to give you a heads up, essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, if there is one thing that you can say that is a shred of comfort to William and William's team, is that this has not come out of the blue. This is not going to be everybody frantically checking their WhatsApps and trying to figure out what's going on. It's like they knew it was coming and presume they're ready for it. Presume they've thought about what their strategy is, how they're going to cope with it. I suspect what their strategy is to shrug their shoulders and say, well, carry on. People are interested in William. People are interested in Harry. It's not a zero-sum game, especially these days. It's not like when one's on the front page. What is a front page anymore? I don't even know, Tim. I mean, it's hilarious, really, that we still talk about front pages, isn't it? Because, I mean, I can't remember the last time I bought a physical copy of the newspaper. But, I mean, so it's, do you know what I mean? Like, I think that it is a good thing. I think that is the one good thing about it, is that Harry told the king what was happening. And frankly, that is because the king and Harry have tried to repair the relationship. So, they've got to give it a go, haven't they? And they've got to now see, okay, everything that's been said has been said. Nobody politically can afford to apologize or take back what has been said. But they all have to deal with each other. They may not want to, but they're all going to have to deal with each other one way or another. So what is the strategy going forward? And maybe this is it, maybe this is as good as it gets.
Tom, did your sources tell you today in the story that you wrote already, did your sources in William's camp say he was feeling irritated sort of by it or not?
No, absolutely nothing coming out side. They're fully focused on Rio, Brazil. That's exactly. So I think that I think that I think there will be a sense of rolling of eyes and a sense of irritation and a sense of like, oh golly, here we go again. But I do think that ultimately, they need everyone, ultimately is able to step back from things, aren't they, and take a breath and say, well, he did serve in the military. I mean, he did have friends who were killed in Afghanistan. So, I mean, it's not like this is coming out of nowhere. He's got a right to mark Remembrance Day. But I think that announcing it today was foolish of Harry. I think it was foolish. I think they should have announced it last week, or they should have tried to schedule something for next week on the 11th of November, which is a very significant day, but wouldn't have clashed with. I mean, it's a bit, isn't it?
I can see that the gnarliness of the timing here, because if you think that if last week Harry and his PR team would have seen that the news cycle was just Andrew everything, last week just would not have worked, and it would have looked really weird last week. And so then we hit this week, and they've already put the call into the palace to say we're doing this thing. So that I has been dotted, that T has been crossed. But then you've got William, I think you said in your article, right? He's physically landing where he needs to be today. So then really, and the events are on Wednesday. So I don't know. I'm not being a diary. I'm being a calendar watch.
Thursday, actually.
What other...
Wednesday is Williams Earthshot, and
Okay.
Thursday is Cop.
Right. So
correct.
there's no, and Harry's dinner is on
Wednesday. So he's doing a dinner on Wednesday, and he's doing another thing on Thursday. Yeah.
So
you know, look, it's pretty pointed. It's nothing happens by accident in the world of the Royals, does it, Tim? Well, we know. Anyway, we are going to let you go now. Thank you so much for joining us at incredibly short notice. Me and Tim are both very flattered by all of your lovely comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you for any lovely comments.
Thank you for all your lovely comments. And if we had one thing that we would like to ask you, it is, please, could you share our videos as widely as possible and tell people that please like and please subscribe, and that'll enable us to keep it free, basically, going onwards. If you want if you want to go one step further, feel free to subscribe to my Substack, theroyalist.substack.com. And if you really want to go one stage further than that, feel free to get a paid subscription to the Royalist. You're more than welcome to do that. And but we really appreciate you guys tuning in. We can't quite believe it. We've only been doing it 2 weeks, I think, at this stage. And to have over 600 people join us live is quite incredible. And probably another several thousand watching the replay. Who would have thought it, Tim? Who would have thought it?
It's just lovely, and thank you, and but also thank you for the really wonderful feedback and questions, because actually they keep both Tom and myself very much focused on. I mean, Tom and I are very used to writing and editing with what do people really want to know, and if they were sitting here chatting, what would they be asking? And I hope, in some sense, we're performing that conduit function. In terms of being a conduit for whatever is on your mind around the subjects we're talking. I hope we're expressing sort of the inner questions and inner thoughts that you may be having. And we do definitely read everything, and it really helps us kind of hone our own discussions. So yes, thank you so much. It's so appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to call it a day, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.